All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope all of you guys are having a great week. We have a jam-packed show today. We're going to be hitting Kings, Suns, Clippers, Warriors, and a game from Monday night that we didn't hit, the Minnesota Timberwolves getting a big win on the road over the Dallas Mavericks. Also, in case you missed it last night, I went on with the great Colin Cowherd, and we hit a bunch of big picture topics around the NBA. You can find that on my podcast feed, his podcast feed, as well as on the Volumes YouTube channel. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Volumes YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And last but not least, if for whatever reason you guys miss one of these videos and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, remember, you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And lastly, before we talk about some basketball, I always go through the YouTube comments because that's a good place for you guys to give feedback for the show, as well as to offer your guys' basketball takes, which I often learn things from. And I've seen a lot of feedback from you guys asking us to cover other teams other than the Lakers and the Warriors. So first of all, we do. They're just typically in the back half of the show. But I wanted to take this example just to kind of explain the format. So I've been out of town a lot the last couple of weeks on ski trips. And so when I'm on vacation, I'm not doing game breakdowns. I'm only working when we have like some sort of major basketball event, like Kyrie Irving demanding a trade or Kyrie Irving actually getting traded. But I'm in town now. I have one other ski trip in mid-April, but other than that, I'm in town basically the rest of the season. So we're going to have a much more normal cadence. Also, we just had the trade deadline. So obviously we're going to be targeting the biggest trades of the deadline. And the biggest trades of the deadline were what the Suns did, but also what happened with the Warriors and the Gary Payton scandal with the Portland Trail Blazers and the Los Angeles Lakers turning over their entire team. So obviously that's going to affect things. And we're also heading into the All-Star break right now. So like I've got this show, I've got one more show tomorrow. We're going to be breaking down a bunch of games from Wednesday night, but then we don't have any basketball for a little over a week. So it's a little bit of a weird stretch, but our normal cadence, on every show, we're breaking down 4 or 5 games. And yes, I have to hit the Lakers and the Warriors. They're our biggest fan bases. We've got bills to pay, and obviously that's the best way for us to grow the show. We're going to continue to hit those teams, but we're also going to hit all of the other playoff teams around the league. And our YouTube team works really hard to parse things out and to put in chapters. So if you're sick of hearing Lakers and Warriors stuff, just skip those chapters and you can get to the other teams. And most importantly, during the playoffs, we will literally be covering every single game from every single team throughout the entire playoff run. So I do appreciate the feedback and I understand where you guys are coming from. I just wanted to clarify that stuff just so you guys know moving forward how to best get to the content that you guys want to see. All right, so let's talk some basketball. Today we're starting with Kings Suns. So the Suns won 120-109. Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton combined for 61 points. They really took control of this game in the third quarter. Sacramento hung tough for a half or so. Chris Paul and Devin Booker were both awesome in the third quarter. Chris Paul had 5 assists. Devin Booker had 10 points. And what I thought was one of the big swing factors in the third quarter of this game was Josh Okogie and his on-ball defense on De'Aaron Fox. Did a really nice job containing him with physicality so De'Aaron Fox couldn't turn the corner, which turned him into a jump shooter in that quarter. And he contested those jump shots really well, and he missed most of them, which was a big part of how Phoenix got going defensively. When I was on with Colin Cowherd last night, I talked about how of all the serious playoff teams, Phoenix probably has the worst point of attack defense. Now, they have every other box checked extremely well, except for maybe some forward physicality stuff, but they don't defend on the ball very well. It's just a matter of personnel. And so when we're looking at their lineups, especially when you're looking at their core lineup of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, KD, and DeAndre Ayton, Josh Okogie makes a lot of sense to me in that 5th spot, essentially as your lead point of attack defender. Point of attack defense is super important, and it's something that coaches pay a ton of attention to. And the main reason why is whoever that team's primary ball handler is, whoever the opponent's primary ball handler, the guy who's going to run the most pick and rolls, he's arguably the most important piece to that team's offense over the course of that night. The reason why is if he can consistently warp the defense by getting downhill or pulling guys out with this pull-up jump shooting, it puts your defense in rotation the entire night, which makes it a lot easier for the other 4 offensive players on the floor. And it's an extremely difficult job. And so you don't want to ask your lead ball handlers on your team to take that job. You would prefer to have somebody that's in a smaller role offensively that can devote their resources to containing the basketball on the defensive end of the floor. Now, I expect them to go with Torrey Craig. It's just been the guy that they've gone to in that spot for the most part this season, and he does a lot of things for them as a spot-up player and also crashing the offensive glass, but not as good of a point-of-attack defender as Josh Okogie. So I'd be really interested to see if, even if they don't start with him, if they end up going with him in their crunch time lineups as the guy that they put on the basketball. The other thing that really stood out to me in this game is just in terms of the energy of the team, they look reinvigorated by the Kevin Durant trade. Both Devin Booker and Chris Paul looked like they had a newfound energy. Chris Paul in particular was playing with a ton of energy. And when that just, like, especially in the middle of the slogs of the NBA season, that sort of thing can really help you lead to wins. And even DeAndre Ayton is playing some of his best basketball of the season right now. He's averaging 24 points and 8 rebounds with 2 blocks per game over the course of his last 2 games. He was really, really good, or over his last 3 games, I should say. He's been really, really good in the last 2 against Indiana and Sacramento. And just watching them last night, I continue to be super intrigued by the basketball potential of the Kevin Durant fit. In that third quarter against Sacramento, Phoenix was running a ton of cleared side pick and roll. So that means they get the shooter out of the strong side corner, and they'll have Chris Paul start lower, usually down like almost by the free throw line extended, and then they'll have Ayton come set the screen so that if Ayton does roll to the rim, or they ice the coverage and force Chris Paul towards the baseline, he's got more room to operate there. And Sacramento was having a lot of trouble containing Chris Paul and Ayton in that action, and so they started bringing a third defender over. They were essentially using what's called a catch hedge on Chris Paul as he was coming off the ball screen. What that means is the big's not trapping, he's not showing, but he's ignoring the roll man to come high enough that he's essentially a soft double team on the ball while whoever's guarding Chris Paul is chasing over the top. Then they bring that third defender over to tag the roll man. And as a result, that weak side a kick pass to Torrey Craig was wide open the entire third quarter. And so the way I look at it is it kind of triggers a 4-on-3, right? Like, let's say KD's out there. They'll probably, in that case, ignore Torrey Craig or Josh Okogie, whoever that fifth guy is. But as soon as that kick pass is made, that whoever that fifth guy is has an opportunity to quickly start a 4-on-3, either by doing a quick dribble handoff to whoever else is on that wing or by driving the closeout and making another kick out. I get super excited about those 4-on-3 situations with Kevin Durant in the mix, because now if Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton are running that action and it gets to that kick out, the guys running that 4-on-3 are literally Kevin Durant with Devin Booker and Josh Okogie with DeAndre Ayton pinned on a smaller defender under the basket. So they're going to be able to get a lot of really good stuff out of that. And then I'm also excited to see Kevin Durant actually have the ball in his hands, starting these pick and rolls with that same dynamic with Chris Paul and Devin Booker on the back end. We're not going to have to wait much longer to see it because the Suns have one more matchup with the Clippers on Thursday before we get into the All-Star break, and Kevin Durant is reportedly going to return at that point. All right, moving on to Warriors-Clippers. This was a nice win for the Clippers over an undermanned Warriors team. Steph and Andrew Wiggins were both out. Andrew Wiggins took the night off for personal reasons, and obviously Steph is still rehabbing the knee injury. But that's arguably their 2 best players. And the core Warriors guys actually hung really tough in this game. But you got to see a great example of the gap in bench talent between these two teams. So the Warriors ended up taking a brief lead in the third quarter after Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole caught a heater. Klay had a really nice ISO one-leg fadeaway against Paul George at the free throw line. Then Jordan Poole got downhill and drew a foul driving to the rim. Then Jordan Poole hit back-to-back threes, and then Klay Thompson hit a transition 3, got a lucky bounce off of the right wing. Suddenly, the Warriors had a lead. But then from there, both teams went to their bench, and these were literally the lineups. So the Clippers were going with Bones Highland, Norman Powell, Kawhi Leonard, Marcus Morris, and Mason Plumlee. And the Warriors went with Ty Jerome, Anthony Lamb, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, and JaMychal Green. 3 of those guys you'd hope to not have in your playoff rotation. And, Jonathan Kuminga is going to be more of a matchup dependent guy when they get to the postseason, right? So just from a personnel standpoint, they were completely overmatched. That group did okay in the first half, really struggled in the third quarter. And next thing you know, early fourth quarter, they're already down 18 points and the game was over. Now, part of this is a regular season problem. Like the Clippers have always had a ton of depth. And that's the kind of thing that's bought them the margin for error to be able to rest Kawhi Leonard and to rest Paul George when they're dealing with nagging injuries. But during those regular season stretches, that depth can help. But then you get to the postseason and the dynamic changes, right? Like if Steph Curry and Andrew Wiggins are available and everybody in the core Warriors groups is playing 36 plus minutes, there's going to be a lot more overlap with the bench groups. Ty Jerome's not going to play. Anthony Lamb and Jonathan Kuminga might play based on, what the matchup is and which guy Steve Kerr trusts. But Ty Jerome's not going to play. Gary Payton's going to be getting in there for a bunch of those minutes. So then all of a sudden it works out okay. But what you see is that in mid-February, when guys are out of the lineup for injuries and for personal reasons, that depth is going to be a problem, and the Clippers won a game off of that last night. So credit to the Clippers for building a roster that buys them a lot of margin for error during these stretches of the season. One last quick note on the Warriors before we move on. There was a quote from Draymond Green that was going around yesterday talking about defense. And he said, quote, "It has to come from within. Defense is all about will, a want to defend. Defense is not fun. You've just got to do it if you want to win, and we haven't." End quote. So first of all, he's absolutely right fundamentally about defense. The Warriors are actually my favorite example in this modern era of NBA history of the fact that defense is about will and about caring and wanting to do so. Just look at their core lineups. Like the Warriors have had outstanding, at defensive talents over the years, right? Like Andre Iguodala has been one of the best wing defenders in the league for a long time. Kevin Durant obviously brought a huge element of physical tools to the defensive end of the floor. But the other core guys in that group, they're really examples of not having those physical tools, but becoming great defensive players by the strength of their will. Like Draymond Green's the best example of it. Like Draymond Green is my height. He's 6'6". Now he does have a really good wingspan and he's very strong, but the way that he impacts games defensively is up here. He's got an outstanding basketball IQ and his ability to sift out plays, but also he has poured his heart and soul into that side of the floor every single day and carved out not just a place in the league, but a place, a place in the higher echelons of the league. Draymond Green's made a second-team All-NBA in his career, and he's, in my opinion, one of the top 3 defensive players in the league without being Rudy Gobert or Anthony Davis or Bam Adebayo, guys that have significantly better physical tools at that position. Klay Thompson, not the best athlete in the world, decent size, 6'7". He's got some tools, right? He's 6'7". He's big and strong. You need a baseline of physical tools. Like even Steph at 6'3", it's not like he's Ja Morant, 175 pounds and just can get shoved around everywhere on the floor. They have a baseline of physical tools, but compared to other NBA athletes, they don't have that type of physicality. Klay is not as athletic as most 6'7" wings in the league, but he, once again, commitment to the details, high basketball IQ, putting in the effort and focus, sliding his feet really well, anticipating changes of direction and taking contact in the chest and contesting shots. Same thing with Steph, and even with Kevon Looney, who compared to most centers in the NBA isn't the best athlete or the biggest center that they have in the league. So the Warriors kind of represent that take that Draymond has, that defense is about heart and that defense is about commitment to those details. There's a lot of guys in the league that have similar physical tools that never panned out. How many times have we seen guys who tried to be Draymond, or I should say GMs who draft guys? Remember Guersan Yabusele from the Celtics? They used to call him French Draymond. It's like, actually, it turns out that just because you're stocky and 6'6" and a decent athlete, that doesn't mean that you can suddenly be a great defensive player. You need to be what Draymond is, which is an anomaly at that position. But the reality is, and the reason why Draymond said this is a lot of that fire has been missing this season. Now, to be clear, the starters have been outstanding. So we talked about this last night, but the best 5-man lineup in the league is still Kevon Looney, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Andrew Wiggins. That group is outscoring teams by 22 points per 100 possessions. They've been really good defensively. They have a defensive rating of 106, which is really good. So that group's been doing fine, but every other lineup that they have is struggling defensively, especially when Draymond is off the floor. When Draymond's off the floor, they're giving up 121 points per 100 possessions. And that's a big part of why they're 19th in defense through 58 games. Now, remember, my rules as it pertains to contenders. If you don't have an overwhelming talent advantage, and if you don't have a significant injury that impacts your defense, so for instance, if like Draymond misses a bunch of time, or if Anthony Davis misses a bunch of time, I'm not going to hold your team to that defensive rating standard. But unless you're missing a defensive player for a significant chunk, or you're the KD Steph Warriors or the Shaq Kobe Lakers, unless you're one of those types of teams, you have to be a top 10 defense in the regular season by defensive rating to have a chance to contend for a title. Now, the Warriors have 24 games left to demonstrate that they have that ceiling, and they need to shave about 2 points off their defensive rating to get into the top 10. What that means is they're going to need to defend at an extremely high level over the final stretch of the season to prove that they still have that gear that they can get to. All right, moving on to Wolves-Mavs before we get out of here today. So the Wolves, this was on Monday night. I just covered a bunch of other games that night, so I didn't get around to this one. And at the time that I was prepping for the show, the Wolves were up big, and it was a blowout, so I wasn't going to get into it. But the Wolves ended up winning 124-121, and the Mavericks actually had a chance to tie this game with a 3 at the end. And Minnesota opted not to foul and just played straight-up defense, and they played outstanding defense and actually forced a turnover, and Dallas couldn't even get a shot up. This was the first example of the Mavs really struggling with a big physical team, which was something that I figured would be a problem for them immediately after the trade. They're hurt on the front line with Maxi Kleber being out. They gave up their best 3-and-D wing and, contested rebound guy from the perimeter in Dorian Finney-Smith. And you saw a lot of that kind of come home to roost on Monday night. They got manhandled on the glass. They got manhandled in the paint. They could not guard Anthony Edwards at the point of attack. When the Wolves went big with Rudy Gobert, they were plus 17 in this game. So there were a lot of issues that they had there. But then what happened was Kyrie Irving just went absolutely berserk in the fourth quarter, had 24 points, and got them back to within having a chance to win. And then obviously the Wolves got the big stop. So there's two things that I want to hit on here. First is Anthony Edwards. So before the season in my player rankings, I had him at 21. The 21st best player in the league. Now, that was higher than most folks, and there were a couple of people who disagreed because I had him ahead of some, more established guys like Chris Middleton or Bradley Beal, things like that. I think I had him ahead of Donovan Mitchell as well. But, I was super high on him after last year's playoffs. Like, I love the size, that downhill physical power going towards the rim. And when you mix that with the way that he was shooting his pull-up jump shot at the end of the season last year, and his on-ball defense, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, I get really excited about that. And obviously Donovan Mitchell was coming off of a super disappointing playoff run. As Bradley Beal missed the playoffs. Chris Middleton was hurt. There's a lot of reasons why I had him up as high as I did. But I was just really bullish in general on Anthony Edwards and his skill set. But then he got off to a rough start this year. And I don't want to put too much of the blame on him because it was a really clunky lineup, and I was critical of that Minnesota Timberwolves offseason from the start. But putting him alongside D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert just was a really clunky fit. A lot of guys who want to have the ball, funky spacing. There were just a lot of reasons why that didn't work super well. But in Anthony Edwards' last 31 games, he's averaging 27 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists on 58% true shooting. That is like legit second-tier superstar level production. His pull-up jump shots coming around too. In his last 10 games, he's shooting 40% on 9 pull-up jump shots per game. But his defense is where I'm most excited. One of the biggest things that excited me about Ant towards the end of last year is he'd get in these on-ball defense possessions, and he's so big and strong that when he would be a little bit handsy and physical, and he slides his feet so well that the refs would give him the benefit of the doubt on a lot of those plays, guards would just be trapped in place and really struggle to get separation from him. And that's where I'd start to think This guy has real two-way potential, especially in a Western Conference that has so many great guards. But you saw it on display at its absolute peak on Monday night against Kyrie Irving. So in the first 8.5 minutes of the fourth quarter, Kyrie has 21 points. He was as hot as I've ever seen him. And then over the last 3.5 minutes, Anthony Edwards completely locked him down. Now, there was one weird play where Frank Ntilikina missed a three and Josh Green got an offensive rebound and Anthony Edwards was leaking in to try to get a rebound. It was a long rebound. Josh Green shoveled it back to Kyrie Irving and he made a wide open three. But aside from that play, he literally could not even get separation from Anthony Edwards. And it culminated with that final possession where Kyrie couldn't even get a shot off. But before that, there were a couple of possessions where Kyrie tried to get separation from Ant and just couldn't. Get to the middle of the floor, pump fakes, all this stuff, and Ant's just got him completely swallowed up with his size and his strength and his physicality. And that on-ball defense helped Minnesota win a game that they probably lose otherwise with the way that Kyrie was playing. And we've seen him ride those hot streaks to making big shots down the stretch and beating teams. He was pump faking at ghosts. I said ghosts. He was here in the footsteps of Anthony Edwards and pump faking at shots that he normally would take on that final possession. And that's a big part of why I'm so excited about Ant's ceiling and why I think he's going to be a megastar in this league for a long time at some point in the near future. Last thing I want to talk about was the Mavs. Defense is obviously a big issue. Physical limitations will be a problem for this team throughout the rest of the season. They're going to have to address that in the offseason. But every time I've watched them play since the Kyrie trade, it's amazing how much of a breath of fresh air he is for that offense. Luka plays a very slow style, and you need to play that style for the record. That's how you win in the playoffs. The game slows down. You need half-court surgeons. So I don't want to undercut what Luka is doing. That's an important part of their eventual playoff ceiling. But there is a lot of advantages that come with pushing the pace. First of all, it helps you get easier shots before the defense gets set. We talk about this all the time on the show. But it also gets the crowd going. It's a fun brand of basketball. And when the crowd starts to feel that push of that transition up and down style, it in turn reinvigorates the players because they're feeding off the crowd, and that breathes life into a basketball team. Like, I think Kyrie single-handedly gave the Mavs a chance to win this game with the change of pace that he brought in that fourth quarter. Now, they're going to need to figure some stuff out, especially with their give and take at the end of games. I didn't like that Luka took the game-tying shot in their previous game against Sacramento. I thought Kyrie had it going. It should have been in his hands. And then there was some overpassing on that final possession. Luka also didn't do a very good job sealing Jaden McDaniels on that entry pass, which caused the whole play to break down from the start because Jaden McDaniels got a deflection. Luka needs to seal him so that it's a lot easier for that pass to come. But they're going to figure that stuff out, and it's going to be fine. And obviously, like I said, they've got to bolster the front court. But I love the natural basketball fit and the give and take and the way that their differences complement each other. And I'm looking forward to watching them over a playoff run. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate your support. We will be back tomorrow morning for one final show before the All-Star game, and that's going to be breaking down Wednesday night's games. I'm not sure if we'll cover the All-Star game. It depends if it's interesting. The All-Star game's a total coin flip. It's either going to be close and the Elam ending is great and it'll be super interesting, in which case we'll do a show. If not, then we'll probably take the rest of the weekend off. Next week, before we get into games returning on Thursday, Carson and myself will be linking up to do an NBA draft preview, going over the top prospects in this year's coming NBA draft. I'm going to be doing a lot of film study over the course of this weekend on those players, prepping for that. I just think here at the All-Star Break's a good chance, a good opportunity for us to dive into that. And then we'll probably have one other video before Thursday where we just kind of do one last final kind of like zoom out, look at all of our contender tiers before we go into the stretch run. All right. Thanks so much for supporting the show, guys. I'll see you tomorrow.